started something. So Coach couldn't be here this year. Ricky knows a little bit about Coach Moore's tirade. So having said that, has he called you and needled you at all since they won their next 2 games?
He did send me a text message right after the San Diego win, when San Diego gave the game to the Saints. And put 12 more games, exclamation point, right after it. After the week before yelling at me 13 games. And I always point out, you know, that's what, I have a great relationship with Jim, as I'm sure you do, and you do as well. And a lot of people felt like he was yelling at me, and I go, I don't think he was yelling at me. I wish he wouldn't have answered the question so literally, because I literally didn't think that Drew Brees was packing it up and going fishing until March. But I meant, is the season over for attaining your goals? Because since 2002, no team has started 0-3 and still made it to the playoffs in the same year. I always say this about the Saints, is that when you have Drew Brees, who's a Hall of Fame quarterback and one of the best to ever play, and you have Sean Payton, who's a true offensive innovator, they'll never be 3-13. They'll never be 4-12. It will never happen with this organization. The low water mark to me is what they've been the past 2 years, 7-9, and I think that's probably where they'll end because of what Josh pointed out. You know, I don't think it's that hard to figure out. I always go back to Greg Popovich, who simplifies things and says things like it's just basketball, it's just football, and when you miss in the draft, when you have no Pro Bowl selections from 2012 through 2015, and a lot of those players have been cut, and when you have $40 million in dead money because you've spent so poorly in free agency, you are a 500 team. I like music, so I jokingly said the other day, to quote Pink Floyd, that the Saints are comfortably numb right now, is that unfortunately, it's in the NFL, it's really hard to be really bad. It's really hard to be the Cleveland Browns. You've got to be really inept to be 1-15 or 0-6 right now. But it's really hard to be the New England Patriots and do what they do every year, 15 years of an amazing run. Usually teams land in that comfortably numb area of 7-9, 8-8, 9-7. The fan base stays engaged and believes long enough, but you're just not good enough. That was the Saints for so long before Sean Payton and Drew Brees got here with Jim Haslett. If you remember, you know, 02, 03, 04, that's what it was every single year. And unfortunately, that's where they are right now, kind of in a comfortably numb spot. And I don't want to try to coin too many cliches here, but I also think Tom Benson is a little bit of a victim of nostalgia, because we constantly talk about getting back to what they had in 06 and getting back to what they had in the Super Bowl and remaining loyal to people who brought that here. But at this point, you're about to embark on your 3rd straight non-playoff season. So maybe it's time to start looking at different things in a different way and not be such a victim of nostalgia. I understand it's hard as a New Orleanian. We love our history and we're very prideful in certain things, and that's the high water mark of the organization. But I somewhat believe that Tom has become a victim of nostalgia, because they talk about that way too much and still talk about themselves being a championship organization, even though we're 7 years removed from it and on the potentially 3rd straight non-playoff season.
I want to bring in Tulane and get Ricky's thoughts too, but first you, Fletcher, on Tulane and where you see this football program right now. Do you see real progress? Are you confident, encouraged by what you see?
Yeah, I mean, look, I like Curtis Johnson. I'm a big Curtis Johnson fan, and I thought he did a great job recruiting the local area, but I do think that he lacked structure as a head coach, and I think that you could have questioned maybe some of the assistant coaches, and I think last year was definitely, things went the wrong way, but I didn't think Tulane would be able to get Willie Fritz. I thought one more year at Georgia Southern, and Willie Fritz is going to go to a Power 5 school, a lot like Dino Babers, who was at Bowling Green, who ended up at Syracuse. I thought one more year, and maybe a low-level Power 5 team is going to come and grab Willie Fritz, because all he does is win. So the fact that Tulane was able to land Willie Fritz, I was very excited, and I think he's going to do some great things for this program. I still think Tulane can get to 6-6 this year and sneak in to one of those lower-tier bowl games, but I would be very excited if I were a Green Wave fan right now, because it's hard not to be. You've got a guy who's coached for 23 years as a head coach, who nothing was ever handed to him from high school to junior college, Division II, FCS, and then a low-level Division I team, and he won everywhere he's been. And so I really like Willie Fritz and think that this is a guy who knows football. And if I could just add one thing, I'm sorry, I know I talked a lot. You talked about Ed Orgeron. I like Ed Orgeron. I think he's great. I'm excited he'll be here next week. But everybody has opinions. I feel like LSU may do themselves a disservice, even if he wins, to hire Ed Orgeron. I look at Coach O and love him. Love his energy. I understand what you're saying. But I think that if Ed Orgeron replaces Les Miles, I would be a little bit let down because Les Miles won a lot. And I understand the bar is set high because of Nick Saban at LSU. But I look at Ed Orgeron like Norv Turner or like Romeo Crennel, or I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, Alvin Gentry. Great assistant coaches, but not necessarily the guy to lead you to the promised land for sustained success as a head coach. So I think LSU, no matter what Ed Orgeron does, and maybe I'll be wrong, but I think they'd be better served looking at other head coaches when they embark on their search.
Okay, Ricky, your take on Willie Fritz and Tulane's program, and then also your take on LSU and where they are right now with Coach Orgeron.
Well, I think that Tulane hired a great coach. Curtis Johnson was all right, as a receiver coach, but he wasn't a head coach, I didn't think. But they got a great coach now, and like I said, if the special team don't, make the 2 turnovers, they had a chance to win the ball game last week. And looking at LSU, if the guy went out, beat Alabama, beat everybody, he'll be one of the guys that I would really consider just because now all the recruits gonna really want to go there. If he went out, how can you not, consider him for the job? But I like try to get Kiffin from Alabama, and the guy from Arkansas. So they got a couple of good coaches out there, a couple of coaches that I would look at. I would try to take the guy from Arkansas or Kiffin from Alabama. Those would be the 2 guys if I didn't keep him as the head coach. Those would be those 2 guys I would look at. And as far as the Saints, like he was saying about the Saints, Tampa Bay won the Super Bowl. Whenever Dungy left, Gruden came in and they won the Super Bowl. And they didn't do anything after that. And Tampa had to end up getting rid of that whole staff after about 2 or 3 years. You can win the Super Bowl, but you want to be like New England. You want to keep at least going back to the playoff and keep showing, some hope that you're going to get back to the Super Bowl. Or what they done did, like Frank said, they done kind of went down. And it's hard to get back up when you go down if you don't know how to get back. And they had, when they was up there, they had great defense. They had great defensive coach. They had, right now, the only thing they got is an offensive-minded coach. But the guy who the Rams got from us, the coordinator, they said that he did a lot of illegal stuff. But one thing he had those guys doing, he had the other team afraid because he knew that he was going to bring the smoke and he was going to, try to take their head off. So they don't have that now. They ain't trying to hurt nobody. They ain't trying to really hit nobody like the coordinator they had, the one, Greg Williams, who went to the Rams. So I took my hat off to Greg. I thought he was a great coach, and he really didn't listen to the head coach as much. Sometimes, you get a defensive coach like Buddy Ryan and all those guys. Let me do my job and you do your job. And when you get a head coach trying to, mess with the defense when he don't know defense, then that's when the problem come in. So what happened? You have to be like, I take my hat off to Rob Ryan from Buffalo and Rex. They got rid of the coordinator. Buffalo won 3 straight games. Sometimes you have to just let guys do their job when you're hiring. So I take my hat off to those guys. But
4 straight for Buffalo.
Right. And like he said, you can tell a good team. Let us play the good teams and see how we do now. Before he played 2 rinky-dink teams, they lost both of them. Then they played 4 good teams. He won all of them. So he made a couple of changes with the coaching staff, and you see a whole different team. Same thing with LSU. Now, LSU doing stuff now that if they'd have been doing last year, they'd have had a lot more recruits want to go there because they're opening things out and they're looking like a pro offense, throwing the ball downfield. And you wonder, where these receivers been at? Why they been held back? And now these guys get a chance to wait pros to look at these guys now because they get a chance to see them. So they're going to make LSU make a lot of players want to go there. So it ain't going to make LSU better.
Tommy, was it a question of recruiting a square peg to a round hole at quarterback at LSU where they were recruiting guys that might have been good athletes but didn't fit the system at all?
Just couldn't fit the system, couldn't get the play from the quarterback position. It's really been, I know we talked a little bit about Coach Miles and tremendous success. I personally have a world of respect for Les. He recruited my son, was a stand-up guy all the way through the process. I really felt as a fan, former player, about 2011, at post-Alabama is when that decline started to happen, and I think a lot of people started to ask questions about this offense and not producing and not having the key critical component of quarterback. And I think that's where it started to build. You look at Lester's record as a whole and not have an understanding that from the beginning to middle to end, you would say, I think LSU fans' expectations are too high. But since 2011, I think you can point to a significant decline that really precluded this.
Well, you know, LSU problem was, to me, they should have got rid of the offensive coordinator a long time ago. I mean, what Lester didn't want to do, fire no coaches. And sometimes, you know, you have to get rid of coaches. Same thing we did with Carl Smith and guys. They wasn't good play callers, and they wasn't very creative for the offense. But the coaches are so in love with them, they rather go down with them. And that's been the problem with a lot of coaches, head coaches. When they hire somebody, they stick with them too long when they don't do a good job.
The big thing to me,
I want to ask Josh this question. The revolving door with the Saints, 12 kickers in the Payton regime, 5 defensive coordinators. Are we finally seeing that maybe it's not the coordinator's fault by and large from a defense's perspective? And then are they finally going to settle on a kicker after all these years?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, Will Lutz has made a couple big kicks, but I mean, I don't know that he's been as consistent as you need him to be. I mean, he hit a 53-yarder in the game that was well short, and I mean, you need him to be more consistent. But I was going to say, I mean, when you two guys were talking, I think the Saints and LSU really do mirror each other. I mean, you look back at when the Saints were having success and when, you know, Les was winning, you know, at his peak. I mean, it was a perfect example of how innovative those coaches can be and how they were, you know, catching all of these teams by surprise. But really, they both just get so set in their ways, and they're a little stubborn, and they don't always adjust to A, the talent they have, B, what's going on around them, both in the SEC and around the NFL. And I think that's why you see a team like the Patriots having success. That's why you see a team like Alabama having consistent success, because they adjust. I mean, you look at the Patriots, you know, back in '07 when they had Randy Moss. They were a deep ball team. He's going deep all the time. Randy Moss has like 23 touchdowns. Then they get the 2 tight ends, you know, with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, and, you know, even with Hernandez gone, the tight end's the best player, let's get the ball to him. They can be a ground and pound team when they had Lawrence Maroney. Now they've got these running backs like Shaden Vereen, Deion Lewis that, you know, are out of the backfield. You got to adjust to all the guys you have, and the Saints are still this, you know, offense where it's Drew Brees, it's Drew Brees, it's Drew Brees, and they're subbing out all these receivers. Like, in my opinion, Brandon Cooks, Michael Thomas, Willie Snead, those guys should be on the field just about every play, because you got to think there's going to be a mismatch with one of those guys, and if the defense is scared that you're going to pass it every down, that's when you find some holes in the running lanes. And I got to see it actually in Detroit, because when I was up there covering the Lions, Joe Lombardi, the quarterback's coach here, came up there, and he tried to implement the exact same scheme that the Saints were running, and that was a square peg round hole deal, because they had Calvin Johnson up there, and Joe Lombardi would willingly take Calvin Johnson off the field for 10 plays a game, and for 8 of those, they would run the ball. So you got to be constantly adjusting to what's going on and know that, you know, you can't be too stubborn, and I think that's definitely been a problem with Sean Payton.
And now Calvin's dancing with the stars, okay? So what a deal. One more topic, then we'll open it up for questions. The Big 12 decided not to expand yesterday. Tulane had high hopes of that occurring. Obviously, it didn't happen. So with that in mind, can Tulane raise the level of its program to make it viable on a national scene? Josh, I'll start with you, and we'll just come across here.
I would definitely think so. I mean, there's been some talent here, but I have to admit, I don't know too much about Tulane, so I should probably leave it to the rest of these guys. But I mean, they were competitive against Memphis, and Memphis has been, you know, a really good team in the Conference USA. So I think it is still Conference USA, right?
American Conference.
American. Okay, sorry. There's been so much change, and now who knows? They might have been in the Big 12 if things went differently today. But no, I definitely think there's a chance. And I mean, with all the talent in the state, you know, if they can, you know, start to accrue more of that and some of the better guys, I definitely think Tulane, you know, could definitely build something.
Fletcher?
yeah, I mean, look, moving up to a higher conference is the dream of every school that plays in a smaller conference. So I certainly think when the Big 12 was talking about expansion, Tulane fit perfectly geographically. New Orleans, it's a Texas-based league for all practical purposes, and geographically you fit with the footprint of the Big 12, and academically you'd rise to be the #1 academic institution in the conference. So those would be the 2 pluses. You know, the city of New Orleans, everything that it can offer, and academically, again, you do look back to a fan base that doesn't really travel in a sustained, you know, I guess, the loserdom that they've been stuck in. For men's basketball, hasn't been to the NCAA tournament since 2005. Football, 1 bowl game or 2 bowl games since 2000. That to me is definitely something that hurt them and made them a tremendous long shot for the Big 12. But that doesn't mean that, they can't continue to try to build their football program, which they are, and they have a great stadium on campus now, and who knows what Dunleavy will do in basketball. But I certainly think that is the goal, to get into a conference. But I don't know which conference it would ever be if it isn't the Big 12. If the Big 12 doesn't expand, then I don't know where Tulane, because the ACC is not taking Tulane. Certainly the SEC isn't, and obviously the Big 10 either. So their only viable option would be the Big 12. And I certainly think they maybe.
I think ultimately the Big 12 will lose a couple of teams, and that might open the door. But that's
But if the Big 12
what they did
loses a couple of
yesterday. What they did
teams-
yesterday is probably going to result in that occurring.
Yeah, if the Big 12 loses a couple of teams, does what happens to the conference? If
Sure.
Texas does jump eventually, and everything.
Texas, Oklahoma are the keys.
Right, if the conference almost crumbled a few years ago with all the defections of A&M and Missouri and Colorado and Nebraska, so I don't necessarily know if they can handle another defection of one of their flagship bell cow teams, but I certainly would love to see Tulane move up. I just don't know if it'll ever.
Tommy, you're an LSU guy, but you like Tulane. You're a hometown guy, so
Yeah,
you'd like to see them succeed.
absolutely. I'm excited for Tulane and for Coach Fritz, and obviously I think, if the opportunity does present itself, it will be based in success. I think Coach Dunleavy and Coach Fritz, obviously with so many years as a head coach, they have the opportunity to make that play through success, and I think that's what's going to drive Tulane, if that opportunity does present itself, is how good these programs do become under the current leadership, which I think is probably the best it's been at Tulane in a long time.
Ricky?
Tulane got a good coach over there. So if they win some ball games and they go 6-6, get to be 7-5, next year they might be able to get in the Big 12. I'll see them getting in the conference in the next year or two.
Yeah, I think the limitation will be the stadium at this point, because they pigeonhole themselves from a space perspective, and ultimately, unless they could expand that, they'd have to play elsewhere to be accepted in a conference. But it's the old chicken and the egg theory, the cart and the horse. You got to win first and get fans in the stands before you can make yourself more attractive to an entity. With that, we got about 10 minutes. We're going to take some questions from the audience, so let's get that started. Yes, sir?
LSU lost the PR battle on the University of Florida game. The what, the wheres, and the whys. And Josh, you may give a national perspective from another part of the world on that. What are the what's, wheres, and the whys? What happened in that situation that LSU's taken such a beating nationally?
Well, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about that, because I don't write about LSU, but I disagree. From what I've read, it's Florida that lost the battle in that PR situation.
My thing is, Florida quarterback was hurt. I didn't think they really had too many guys hurt. I didn't think they wanted to.
I know what you're saying, though, is that, but let me say this, I think Florida certainly lost the PR battle the week of Matthew. So they looked horrible. I think Jeremy Foley's an idiot and screwed the whole situation up, and you go back to the root of all evil, and he's the root of all evil. If they'd have just rescheduled the game, their original, we're not moving it from Gainesville at 11 a.m. on Saturday, was the dumbest thing I've seen in a very long time. And Sankey should have stepped in immediately and said, you can't just throw the gauntlet down like that. They should have moved it immediately to Sunday or Monday, and everything would have been fine, and they could have played that game. LSU obviously offered to fly up the team to Baton Rouge, and I understand them not wanting to have to play a conference game when they still have a chance to win their division on the road at a very tough place. But still, you're right. To me, Florida and Jeremy Foley were the ones that screwed everything up, and now they're kind of making LSU as if they were inflexible about wanting to give up a home game to go play on the road. I think there were a lot of people that were at fault here, but I certainly think anybody, and there are some people nationally and a lot of different sites that are throwing LSU under the bus for saying we won't move our game on November 19th. But I think that most logical people, not the homerish Florida people or the homerish LSU people, I think everybody would say, as Sean Payton always says, there's a lot of dirty hands in this. I think there were a lot of dirty hands in that.
Well,
but I certainly
here's
the
the
thing
deal.
that-
I'll let Tommy comment. Here's the deal, real simple. Everybody budgets. If you run a business, you budget each and every year annually. And the reason when people say, well, they're going to have to go to Gainesville 2 straight years. Yes, but you haven't budgeted for next year yet. You budgeted for this year based upon a home game on that date. And if you budgeted for a home game on that date with 100,000 people and the revenue that goes along with that, if you're a business person and you're holding someone accountable and you fall in way under budget, you got a problem. Next year you can make that adjustment. LSU was right in this circumstance. I've read some of the things that you've spoken of, including something by Rachel Nichols. What does she know? She has no clue about what's going on in this situation. She might have one orange eyeball, one blue one for all we know. But the fact of the matter is, anybody that understands what transpired knows that Florida screwed this thing up. The evidence is easy, Tommy. There were 3 other games played that were impacted by that hurricane.
Correct. Look, I don't blame Foley. I think he made a power play. He knew his team was beat up. They knew LSU would come to town, either in Baton Rouge or Gainesville, and run roughshod over them. So I think they held their stance firm for a reason that we'll never know officially. And then LSU did the same thing. The only thing that I was disappointed in has been the conversation or the communications coming from the SEC commissioner, who was almost throwing dirt back at LSU. And I have a problem with that because Florida drew the same line in the sand that they're punishing LSU in the press for. And that's the only thing that bothered me. I understand both AD's positions. In the middle is the commissioner, and he clearly chose a side publicly and in the newspaper and quotes, and that was very disappointing for LSU.
Florida needed a bye week.
Well, LSU might have lost the PR battle, but I guess they win the war, right? Because they get the game at home.
Well, they have to lose next year's game, which you only get.
Right.
I mean, losing a home game next year isn't good. I think both schools compromised, but again, I get back to the root of the problem. To me, was Jeremy Foley drawing the original line in the sand and being inflexible, and that's where everything started. So you're right. I do think LSU.
And the other factor here, and we'll take another question, is the fact that this benefits Coach Ogeron, and any chance he has to keep that job, getting that game at home is going to help him in that particular.
Well, it would have helped him more playing South Alabama, but
Naturally. Yes, ma'am.
If the commissioner of the SEC had Andy Huntless and had told Mr. Foley, you either schedule this game this weekend, either Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, or you forfeit the game, it would have been played. We could not be sitting here talking about this right now.
Well, it happened with Commissioner Silv years ago with
Sure did.
LSU. He said, you guys have till Wednesday to work out a date and a time, or I will make the call.
Correct.
We didn't hear that from this commissioner.
Because South Carolina, one of them moved their game back up.
yeah, they moved their game.
Right, they moved
Right.
their game back. And
They should have just said Tulane was talking about this Tuesday night. Now, Tulane did have an open date the same as Central Florida, so it was an easy fix for them. But they had a plan in place on Tuesday night. The SEC waited just to
Therein lies the rub, Fletcher. The game is at 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and they're making a decision on Thursday, less than 48 hours before. That's ridiculous.
I have a quick question here too, Ricky. Lane Kiffin?
Hey, I think that what he doing at Alabama, he doing.
Oh, look, I agree.
He doing a great job at Alabama. You got to give him credit. So my thing is, I think that LSU needs to come with a good offensive minded person. I mean, Les, I don't really know what Les do. All he do is stand on the sideline. I don't see him call no plays. I don't see him really talk to nobody. I think they need somebody who interact with the players and have the players on offense accountable for what they're doing. I don't see that in there.
So what you're saying is Les was a player's coach. He just didn't coach the players.
Well, I mean, you get some coaches just, letting the other coaches coach and don't really, like Coach Marr. Coach Marr let Carl Smith run everything.
Good.
Right.
How you doing, Rick?
And he didn't know what Carl Smith was calling. He didn't know what he was doing. And I used to walk by and I ask Coach sometimes, you know what he's doing? You can't know what he's doing. Some of this stuff he calling, you can't know he calling this stuff. And the head coach, you're responsible for the whole, shebang. So I want to know what Ken doing on offense. This ain't right. And you throwing the ball, we got 3 downs to go, and we're going to run the clock out and win the game, and you throwing it incomplete. No, I got to see you that, man, you don't know what you're doing. So I got to work with you. So that's what you're looking for. And I didn't ever see Les move to go fuss at nobody or do nothing. But I know one thing Kiffin going to do. He going to have those quarterbacks doing good. He going to have that offense rolling. And that's why I take it. Now, for the person and stuff that he done did off the field or whatever, I don't know nothing about him with that.
Yeah, before I let Tommy weigh in too, the moral woulda, shoulda, coulda speech. Did that truly inspire you guys? Did you guys really take heed of that when you went on that 9-game win streak?
No, I didn't pay that no attention. The same thing, Coach Marr would say stuff, and just like one time he told us he didn't want nobody doing no commercial, we was getting too much, we was all winning, and we was so big time. And then the next week, he got a commercial. So I didn't pay none of that.
Well, I can share that when we had pregame speeches with Bill Arnsparger as head coach, half the room was sleeping right before the game. So, that was that inspiring.
No, I just had a follow-up. As a Minnesota grad who hates Wisconsin as much as the LSU fans hate Alabama, Brett Bielema? Really?
Well, I mean, I like the Arkansas coach because one thing he do is he gonna bring toughness.
That's
You know
true.
what I mean? And then if you look at wherever he won ball games. He made the bowl game. He gonna bring toughness. LSU needs somebody to bring some toughness there. So you know what I mean? You can go get other coaches, but I just like those two.
It would be good for the running backs, definitely, from what he did at Wisconsin and now at Arkansas.
And I will say this, and not to, get back to what Ricky said though, but I do think Greg Williams' history will look back more favorably because they have completely buried him on Airline Drive with the entire bounty scandal. I mean, they've tarred and feathered him. But I certainly think you look at the most successful years of the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era.
Can't
It's
deny
9, 10, and 11.
Can't deny it.
And so to me, they can say what they want about Greg Williams, but they probably should pat him on the back and say, he deserves a lot more credit than he gets because the years that he wasn't here, 06 was a good year, but the 3 greatest years of the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era were when Greg Williams was here as defensive coordinator.
And coach is a head coach. He's an offensive-minded guy. You can see he don't know nothing about defensive players. I mean, not one thing about defense. And it's always, they don't even know how to pick defensive talent really over there. So, with Greg Williams being over there, Greg Williams see defense and he knows defense. And right now you can tell that they have nobody over there have a clue about defensive players.
All right, 1 or 2 more questions before we have to wrap it up. Back there, I'm sorry. Go ahead. We didn't get you yet. Yes, sir.
Ricky, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. 20-something years ago, there was a radio phone commercial. You closed out saying 57, I thought they retired that number. What happened? I know they retired it, but you still see 57 on the field.
Well, you can't do nothing about that. I know they're gonna retire Drew Brees them, and I know they're not gonna let nobody wear Archie Manning them. So I don't worry about that. I'm in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, so whatever they do,
We did a report on this at WDSU, so I can answer this question for you because I know Ken and I have talked about this
Yes, we
before.
have.
Pre-Tom Benson, they retired numbers.
Yes.
There are actually 3, but when Tom Benson bought the team, this ownership group does not recognize any retired numbers. They say they don't believe in retired numbers, which I guess is fine. That's why they still issue 57. That's why they still issue 77, which is Willie Roaf's jersey number. But no one, because of the training, no one has ever been issued Archie Manning's jersey because of...
That was done by the trainer.
That was done by the gentleman who was there for 40
Equipment
years.
manager.
The equipment manager, right.
Not the trainer,
Dan
equipment
Simmons, who was the longtime equipment manager, refused to issue it because of his relationship with Archie. And I'm pretty sure whoever runs the training room is going to get the same... You never give out number 9 once Drew Brees retires. But technically, they say as a team policy, since
Here's
Tom
the
Benson
deal.
bought
They
the
retired the number. They
Right.
should have honored it. Didn't do
Right.
it. And they retired Jim Taylor's number. He played 1 year here. They retired Doug Atkins' number. Played 3 years here.
But-
So that was a mistake made by the original regime.
Right.
And once you get into retiring numbers, you've only got 99 numbers. You're eliminating significance there. So that, to me, is an issue in itself. They made a mistake early on, but it's a mistake to have rescinded what they could
Right, but the new ownership does not, says they don't retire numbers, therefore they don't recognize the retired numbers that were done, or current, but I will say this, what Ken said, is the Bears have retired, one of the oldest teams in the NFL, they've retired something like 30-something numbers, so they've actually had to stop retiring
Have to.
players' numbers,
Yes.
because as an old franchise, they've retired 30-something players.
That's why Hall of Fames and Ring of Honors are important.
Well, I still look at it as you're going to retire Drew Brees' number. He's never going to wear it again. He's never going to wear Archie Manning number. I'm the first thing in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And by me being an African-American, and those two guys, it just looked kind of strange and funny, you know what I mean? And I just look at it and keep rolling, because it don't bother me really. It bothers people around me and they talk about it. But my whole thing is, I played for the Saints for 13 years, and I've been blessed to get out the game, not hurt. Ended up playing 15 years, got a Super Bowl ring, so God been good.
I agree. I think 57, 77, Morton 7, Archie's 8. I think a handful of numbers, without question, should never be issued to anyone.
Well, it's not a black and white issue. What is a black and white issue is the numbers should never have been unretired. It's that simple. Once you do something, you honor your word, right, Tom?
Absolutely. City champ.
There you go.